Wow. Welcome back, everyone. You know what's so exciting is when I get to have a co host. And today, my co host is Steve Vannoy, co founder of Authors Who Lead. And we're talking about our new series, Adventures in Cinder Bottom. And we're going to be talking about book two, Greenbrier River, mainly because we want to talk about what it's like to do these things together and the challenges and resistance we have when we write books and why we're doing this at all. So, welcome to the show, Steve. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks, Azul. I'm so happy to be here. I'm really excited about this for sure. Greenbrier River finally came out. So, yeah, let's talk about
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So during the writing of these books, many of you may not know, you might be new here to this podcast, is that Steve and I began interviewing Steve's father, Smokey Vannoy, during the pandemic. He always used to say things like, "Hey, let me tell you one, Azul," and he'd tell me a story. And as time went on, I think we realized that these stories had some deeper meaning. And some of these stories Steve had only just heard for the first time. And that's really when Cinder Bottom, this red light district in just outside of where Smokey grew up in North Fork, was in a small town called Keystone right next door. And there's this red light district. And when he started talking about this, we got really curious because we're like, wait, tell us more about that. So, Steve, for you being the son of Smokey and writing these books, it's got to be more than just a fun project, because during the writing of these books, in particular during the process of book three, as we were drafting it, Dad passed away. And so Greenbrier River, to launch it, is a book we are launching without having Dad read all of it. He read half of it. How does that make you feel?
It's such a mix of a lot of mix of emotions because seeing the books come to life was something he was a part of, in the beginning. He was able to celebrate with us. Having the first book completed. He was reading the second book when he became really ill. And a few months later, he passed away. And so the fact that we were able to finish the development of that book, because even though he had the rough manuscript, we still had to do editing. We still had to do work to it. And I know that he would be really thrilled, because one of the last things he said to tell me and you before he passed away, it was actually probably less than 2 days before he passed. He said, "Tell those boys to keep writing those books." That was
Not,
his final message. So here we are.
yeah, yeah, not take care of your mom, which I think that's understood, or not even that I love you, which is amazing. That's how important these books became to us, and that's why I think even right now, as we're talking, Greenbrier River, the second book in the installation, is live, and we hope that you all read it and leave us a review. That's, of course, what all authors want. But one of the things that I really want to stress is how much it's made you and I grow closer. Having to read these books out loud, edit them, go back, talk about these characters with Dad gone is a way for me, at least, to feel like we're doing the service of what he requested, but also out of a joyful place. Like, I love doing the work. Talk about what the difference is for you, why book two is a must read. I mean, Gone Missing really solidifies some of the ways the relationships between Smokey and his best friend Duwat kind of forge this bond, but they don't really get to know each other as intimately because there's a lot more characters in that book. Tell us what the difference is for book two for you, Steve.
Well, I think a few important things happened with book one, and one being that this peculiar, unique place called Cinder Bottom, which was a red light district you mentioned, it came about in the late 1800s. So, our book takes place in the 1950s, decades and decades later, but it had established itself. And I think book one really helped us establish the backdrop of understanding this unique and interesting place in the world that had come about just by circumstance. And book two really transitions and focuses more on the inner depth of the characters, I think, and especially Smokey and Duwat's their relationship, their friendship, the deepening of that, because they travel away from home for the weekend to go fishing, and because the Greenbrier River isn't really close to where they live. They go on. This is an adventure for them to leave McDowell County and go to the Greenbrier River upstream from Hinton, which isn't far from where I grew up. And I think it's just fun that they're alone finally. and having conversations and involved in something where we get a little bit of a little more introspection and depth and peek inside of their relationship and how they handle things when it doesn't necessarily go as planned, because they just want to float down the river and catch some fish. And
Yeah.
even by the title, we know that's not what happens in Adventures in Cinder Bottom. There's going to be some kind of shenanigans or something for them to get into and solve.
Yeah. I think the reason I had initially decided to go that route was I have some core storytelling that really seeded within me when I was young. One of them, the very first book that I chose that I read on my own as a middle school kid, was The Old Man and the Sea. And the reason that was so pivotal is that it captivated me when there was really no action besides sitting in the ocean. I thought that was fascinating. I thought, how do you keep people's attention fishing? And it's kind of a challenge. And then when Dad mentioned, because he talked to us a little bit about what he did, and one of the things he would do is float the river on a canoe, and they would camp out. And so that was sort of the seed that I needed. And we asked him specific questions about, what did you use when you were fishing? What did you use, worms or not? And those little nuances created the truth of it. And the story for me was about their relationship that Smokey has with himself, and also the relationship he has with wanting to get out or to be known or to be seen, accepted maybe. And then what happens when the relationship of him and his best friend get pushed to the edge. So for me, it was really about learning the depths of who you are and what matters. Like getting your name in the paper and being famous is one thing that Smokey talks about in the very beginning, but at the end he realizes that's not what matters. That's not what makes you indelible to history or to life. Like you have to be settled within the truth of yourself. And I think that's what I learned writing this Greenbrier River, the second book. What did you take away, Steve? Because it's so interesting to hear what authors take away from their own writing.
Yeah, I think what you've just said, is for one. And then with Smokey and Do What, facing challenges together and also having to do that inward look and knowing what's important. One of the things that touched me a lot in writing this book, or what I've learned from it, is how much the opportunities they get presented. One, they both have challenges in their own lives at home, and then to be faced with challenges when they just want to go have fun, and seeing others who are at maybe at even a disadvantage from their perspective. I find that they both tend to discover more compassion within themselves for others, as well as even having compassion for themselves. So that just discovery of how important it is to be compassionate. And we don't get to walk in each other's shoes, but we can certainly see each other in a different way. And I think that's one of the things they get to do in this book. It's really touching.
I think compassion is an important theme, because it's not just for another person. It's for the river. It's for the place they live in. I know for me writing this book, I think because Dad was still here, I felt very safe writing a book about two buddies fishing on a river. And I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I didn't know how it would end. I didn't know how it would end until the last word came out. I really didn't. To me, the ending is so profound, but I can't take any credit for it, to be honest. It just happened. And I know I feel a little strange. Maybe if you're listening, you don't understand. So this book's set in Appalachia. I had only recently been there when I met Steve, because I had never been to West Virginia and I hadn't spent any time on the Greenbrier. I didn't live in West Virginia, but the last, probably 15 years or so that I've been going back and forth to West Virginia, in particular Bluefield and McDowell County, and just understanding the nuances, how this, young Latin Filipino kid raised in California is writing about Appalachia. And why does it matter to me? Because I want people to understand this. I'm not capitalizing. I'm not trying to find a way to make a profit off of or anything like that. I want to tell true stories, true to the characters that exist on the page, that aren't mocking or making fun of or belittling people from Appalachia, because I feel like they get so much of that in the media from other people from other surrounding states. And I just didn't want that to be the case. I didn't want to create a stereotype that mocked people, because it really struck me when I heard you videotaping Mom reading book one out loud to Dad. It could make me cry to think about it, because the way she read it is how I intended it. It wasn't supposed to be a book of dialect, because your mom knows she has an accent, but she doesn't hear it. She doesn't hear it like other people hear it. She only hears her voice the way she hears it, just like I hear my voice the way I hear it. But to hear her read the book with words that aren't riddled with too many like sayings, you get to read it in your own voice. I don't know what your experience was because you're from West Virginia. Your accent's adjusted over time because you spent a lot of your life outside of West Virginia by now. But how did it feel hearing? Like, we even got critique from an award critiquer who didn't like the fact that they were excited it was going to be in dialect, but then realized it wasn't and was kind of disappointed or maybe let down, but not in a positive way. I think they just kind of wanted to hear the accent and think it's interesting, but not about the story. What's your thoughts about all this?
Wow. That's a loaded question in so many ways. I have still lived more of my life in West Virginia than anywhere else. I was born and raised there. And I went all through school, including university and at West Virginia University. So, and then I also had my first jobs there. So I spent a lot of time coming of age in my own way. Being from Appalachia, being from West Virginia, and in my travels and meeting other people over the years, just faced so many reactions to that. And a lot of times it really wasn't positive, or there would be just like a little jab. Oh, well, you don't sound like you're from West Virginia, or you're too educated, or you have all your teeth. There were so many things that were just shocking to me throughout my upbringing that people would say about people from West Virginia. And what's interesting in having the opportunity to write stories like The Adventures in Cinder Bottom is that we're at the driver's seat to create the world and share all the things that we love and all the things that are challenging at the same time about being in this place. In the 1950s in particular in McDowell County, there were over 100,000 people. So to put things in perspective, there are less than 20,000 people living in McDowell County, West Virginia today. It's one of the poorest counties in the nation and has faced a lot of different challenges. But during the 1950s, it was booming and there were people everywhere lining the streets, the stories that Dad would tell us. And I don't think, for some places in the United States in particularly, there were people and it's like they've always been there. This is a place where people came for opportunity. And a lot of them came from really challenging backgrounds and difficult situations. My grandfather came when he was a teenager from a farm in North Carolina. And there were other boys who joined him and got work in the coal mines. There were people from other countries, from Italy, from Poland, from Hungary, from Germany. They were from everywhere. And they were living in this special place tucked away in the hills. And I think often misunderstood by a lot of the rest of the world outside of there that couldn't really relate to the type of lifestyle and the type of communities that were existing. I mean, even to have a red light district, there were a lot of efforts to paint negative pictures of that and talk about all of the crimes, all of the problems, and all of the issues that come from a place that has brothels and gambling. But our dad, one thing is he gave us a different perspective as a young teenager, as a young boy who grew up having all of these people as neighbors, as the store owner or the person down the street, the lady that he would meet on his walks to meet up with his friends. So I know I'm not necessarily answering your question, but it's important to know that we're talking about human beings and people who aren't there anymore, but their stories and their legacies are important for people to realize that although the place has changed, the heart and the spirit and the light and the love of the people who called this home, that's the thing we wanted to focus on, is those relationships and the depth that happens when people share a common experience like that.
Right. I think for me as an outsider, it was really important to hold true to that honesty in the characters that are in the book, but also not belittle, not shame, not make feel bad, not demonize a place, especially because there are people living there. But even in the past, I think it's really easy for people to do that. And in this time of this book being released, there's a lot of division in our country and people were pointing. And I didn't want anybody to point. I don't want people to point at those people, whoever those people in your mind are. I didn't want to have a sense of those people. I even tried to, with you, create the empathy for the co-executive, which is really difficult to do in some ways, because of the way people perceive that. And also then really difficult. I didn't want to demonize coal, nor did I want to lift it up as important. It's just something that happened and that existed, and people lived there and they had lives. So that was really important to me. And anyone trying to write a book about their family, it's challenging, because I think that's why me taking the stab at the story structure before you diving in and making it more real is important, because when it's home, it's you. There's so much emotion attached to it. I'm not emotionally attached to being from there. Even though I've been there a lot of times, I've visited where Cinder Bottom was. I've been to Keystone. I've been to Welch. I've been to Norfolk, Backdown County in general, and I've enjoyed my time there. But it is a different place than it was. So I have to imagine it from Dad's stories, and I love hearing them. I love hearing what he has to say. And because he's a real person to me, he's not a tale. He's not though the tales he would tell, some of them were like quite larger than life. But for the most part, I felt like the humanity was in the books. And that's what we call this type of writing fiction with purpose. I wasn't trying to satisfy, nor Steve, a genre or let's figure out what historical fiction is. What are all the tropes, which are all the things that make it true. I really wanted this just to become its own thing, and then we'd figure out what it was after, which is mainly because we had a deeper reason for doing it. I wanted to immortalize Dad, his stories, but also give a voice to a people who get shit on, if I'm honest. And I don't like that. Anybody getting shit on. They don't deserve that. They've done nothing to deserve that. And this is my chance to do the good that I'm asking Smokey and do what to do in the book, to stand up and say something, even if it's hard. Because a lot of people want to point fingers and blame a lot of things on people. And I think that's just totally not necessary.
Yeah. And really being from small towns or small communities, especially for people in Appalachia, there's something about the hills and hollers and the land, the challenges that come with even connecting by the roads, the windy roads. And but until the 70s, I think it was, there wasn't a tunnel that connected West Virginia and Virginia in the town where I grew up in Bluefield. And once that opened, so I never really I didn't experience what it was like, but it used to take almost an hour to get from one state to the other to cross the mountain. And now you can do it in less than a minute, driving through a tunnel on a 4-lane highway. So much has changed. But when you're in those places where you're tucked away each other, and it blurs the lines of politics. It blurs the lines of even color, in a lot of ways, for the time frame that we're talking about, because we're talking about before the Civil Rights Movement, and a lot of segregation and challenges in so much of the country. From stories that my dad shared, it was quite interesting where he grew up, because it was kind of a half black, half white type of area, or at least Keystone was. And he was so close to that in North Fork, that he interacted with his neighbors, that he was in places that maybe if he lived in a different part of the country, he wouldn't have had access to.
Yeah. And I think what's been hard, I don't know, it felt a little easier getting ready to launch book 1, even though Dad was already gone. I think that was the hardest part. I wanted him to be able to hold it and see it and feel it. But I also just remember hearing him talk about hearing the book being read to him, and man, what a precious moment. I think we should share that. And let's talk about this. Let's get honest here, because if you're listening, I interview people, I ask questions, but like, I want to be honest here. Marketing this book has been a challenge. And if you're struggling, if you're listening and you have a book or you're thinking about it, you're like, oh, I'm worried about the marketing. Probably rightfully so, because then you got to be seen. Because once you put a book out in the world, you can't take it back. And you're vulnerable, right? You put yourself out there. And even though the reviews for book 1 have been outstanding, and I think that's great, I want more of them. If you're listening and you haven't left a review, but you've read Gone Missing, please leave us a review. But if you haven't, we want your honesty. I don't want you to just give me a good mark or a good rating. I want you to honestly, genuinely give us your impression. We've got some good feedback that helped inform book 2, and I think will help inform book 3. But I don't know. I don't know why it's been so hard. I think some of it is maybe we're missing Dad, at least for me. This is where he lives now, which is sort of kind of Like he lives in these books, and other people get to know him. Maybe it's hard because thinking we deserve this is hard, you know. I don't know what it's been hard for me, to be honest, and I'm doing better as we speak, and we're doing better as we sit down to write these posts to share about this. But I think this emotional part's what we need to talk about, Steve. Like, why is this so hard for us? I want to hear from you. Has it been hard for you the same way?
Oh, it's so hard. I think you know that. I was crying earlier, just wanting to share about it on social media. There's so much noise around us all the time, and so to celebrate something when others are suffering or when there's challenges going on in the world, that's also part of why this is challenging.
Yeah.
But, I think the other piece is as we progress along, and now book 2 is out. We have one more book in the series, at least planned so far. A Place Called Home is our book 3 that's coming up, and we haven't set a date for that release yet, but it's almost like nearing the end of something that's been this beautiful journey. It's full of love and pain and sadness and grief and excitement, and it's kind of all of the things. And like you said, Dad is living in the pages in some way. He lives in these stories because they were stories he shared with us. Obviously, we take some liberties with fiction to create situations and things that weren't necessarily part of the stories that he shared, to create a whole book. But whenever we come across it, and like sitting with you and reading aloud, I know that's one of my favorite things to do with these books now, because when we touch on a story that we heard him tell us, or we're just experiencing his spirit in it, it touches me and gives me so much gratitude that we actually did it, because we could have talked about writing these books and it never actually happening, and instead we did it.
We were able to write them while he was sick, when he was in recovery, when he got sick again, when he died, when our family was having challenging situations, our daughter was in the hospital. There's so much hard things going on. So I know if you're listening, like, oh, it's really hard right now, maybe let creativity be your respite from the hard things. Because for me, when I went into writing mode, I forgot about all those things. And it gave me just a little bit of rest from the worry. And the characters experienced some things. So like kind of through me, some of the hard things I was going through, I was able to put some of these hard things out. And I think I would definitely say book 2 is a deeper book in some ways, because it's asking the characters to reveal more of themselves. But I still think I was holding back some, maybe because there was still like, I know that we're writing this book and that Dad will not be here eventually, even if he pulled through the last time he was ill. But doing it for the sake, because he wanted us to. It wasn't like we didn't have someone lose somebody. Go, God, I wish we would have asked questions. I wish I would have. No, we did it, Steve. We did it, and that's like like you said, so many people talk about that, and maybe we could have just had him write down his stories. We put in a little picture book, and here you go. These are the stories you told us. I just don't think that had the magnitude of this series. Like this series has a life. This series is important to me. Dad was the dad that I needed in my life, and Smokey's the character that needed to be there for me. And so I get to be there for Smokey the character, the same way that Smokey the real person was there for me. So touching. It's just one of the greatest things I've got to do in my life. I always wanted to be a writer, but just never had the skill or confidence, perhaps. And I don't think I'm a great writer. I might be an okay writer. The good writing comes from the iteration, right? The editing, the doing it again. As we were reading it, we were laughing like, oh, we could have changed that. We could have done that. We could have. And you're so tempted never to publish something because you'll find things like that when you're done. That's just okay. That's how you learn. But if you hold back and you think, well, this is not the right time, that's the indicator it is. Whenever you hear yourself say, well, this isn't a good time, then that's absolutely the opposite is true. This is the perfect time. How do I know that? Because this is the only time you have. To assume you'll have time to do it later is a folly. That's why we have 3 books written from our dad who gave us notes over Zoom and occasionally in person. And then we took those and did it. We didn't have any more time. I told you all the hard things that were happening in our lives. That was just a few of the hard things. There was many more. And yet we did it. Steve, what's one thing you'll take away from learning from the characters in book 2? Like what what's a lesson you can hold on to?
Gosh, I'm still on compassion and not making assumptions about other people and the things they're going through, or, where they're coming from. I mean, this book gives a glimpse into so many aspects of humanity, because it's also about those who have a lot and those who have a little when it comes to wealth. And in the end, none of that matters. Our humanity and our care for each other and being able to see each other, I think that's what I'll focus my takeaway on with this book, because it's a very touching book, and I'm really proud of the message that it brings.
Yeah. I think the message for me might honestly come first from the river. I was surprised that I wrote a book about a river and fishing, because that is not something I'm doing. It's not something I don't have a tackle box. I don't even own a fishing rod, but I have in the past. I understand that world. There's a lot of time they spend on a canoe, which I taught canoeing as a Boy Scout leader, and I loved the peacefulness of canoeing. So there's some special things about the river, and the thing about the river is it doesn't pause for you like life. It just keeps going. And on the river there's freedom. Like for Smokey, he always wants to escape Norfolk and and the whole idea of living in McDowell County, but his adventuring in the past has been with Do What sharing the National Geographic and cool places, and yet the river represents that sort of adventure. So for me, there's that. The river is a character in this. It's unforgiving. It can take your life. It can give life. It's that kind of thing, and it also represents the freedom and movement and change. And I think part of it was I knew that I wanted Dad to see that the river, because he talked about it so fondly about fishing. So I thought, yeah, that's an important place to have the river. And I didn't know what would happen there. I didn't have an idea of, when I started drafting the story outline, what could possibly go wrong from fishing on a river, right? It's a small river. It's bigger than where they were from, but it's not like we're talking about the Colorado with crazy things happening. It's big rapids, but there are rapids. There are things that happen on a river. There's the quietness that you pay attention to what dawn and dusk are like on a river. You're more aware of the fact that the thing that gives you life is in there, like fish and water. And so some of my takeaways are just the majesty of life and how incredible it is that we all, any one of us, get another day after this moment. It's incredible. Like, who are we? What makes us think that we deserve this life? It's just a miraculous story to me. And I'd say lastly about this is, if you have a story in your heart, no one's going to tell you it's the right time or the right story. In fact, some people might tell you the opposite. And yet our book became #1 new release in 4 categories because we're finding an audience who likes those books, right? And it doesn't have to be on a billboard New York Times bestseller. It just has to find the audience that we're hoping to. And if it's not this month, this year, it will happen, because we're committed to sharing this message. Any last piece of advice for our listeners who are thinking about writing, whether it's a nonfiction book or a fiction book or fiction with purpose, that you would give, Steve?
Yeah, I would say just get started, and don't worry about doing all the research and gathering all the information. Just start writing. Maybe start writing why it's important to you to begin with. That's what we always tell authors is, what's your big why? Why does this matter to you? Why is it important? And I think we knew that it was so important, having multiple conversations over the years with our dad, that once we got started, we were going to finish this. We were going to see it through. But you got to just get started. You can't worry about how perfect it is, or whether you can always change it. Get the lump of clay on the potter's wheel and do that with your words. Yeah.
I must confess, I have, in the past life that I had until now, I have been a starter, but not a finisher. And if you're one of those, you know what I mean. You love to start things. There's excitement about getting something new. It's really different when you have to finish and take it to the end, because maybe you found something else that's new. I've learned a lot about slowing down and not moving ahead too quickly. And the result has been these beautiful novels. And I hope that they find their way into people's hearts, that they read them again and again and look for new things, that people in McDowell County find these books or get these books and can see the stories. We've already heard from some amazing people through reviews like, oh, that's how it was. We even had somebody say, oh, I know who that is. And it wasn't, we thought, oh, they must have known Smokey. It's a small town. And they said, yeah, that Smokey's so-and-so's dad. And then come to find out it wasn't anybody that knew Smokey. It just, that's what's such a rewarding thing when you create characters in a town, in a setting that's so unique and that people go, that's how it was, or that's just like so-and-so. That gives me the greatest joy. And I hope that you all find this book is joyful. We love your honest opinion. Book 3 is coming out, and I think we might do something totally different with that book, leaning into the characters more. We're about halfway through that one, and man, I've learned so much about writing. And I hope that you all will join us on this adventure, this writing adventure. Be creative, be yourself, show up, and don't worry about making it good. That's something that can be made good after it's written. Don't think about it while you're writing, because you'll throw it away and start again too many times to ever finish. Even the greatest of writers have felt that way. King, in his book about writing called Stephen King on Writing, talks about that he threw away the manuscript for Carrie and the trash can, and his wife fished it out. Everyone goes through that imposter feeling. Everyone thinks their book's rubbish, and at least at one point. And so that's why it's important for me to keep writing. I'm like, I can't look back. I just got to keep going, because I know I'll get better if I just keep writing. Thanks again, everybody, for being here. Steve, thank you for being my co-host today.
Yeah, thank you.
And I hope that everyone out there does what Steve says. Just begin. Have an amazing day. Thanks again for all your support. We hope you subscribe to this podcast, but also that you support us with this book and tell us what you think. You can buy anywhere you buy books. We like to support local bookstores. So if you go into your local bookstore and say, I'm looking for Greenbrier River by Steve Vannoy and Azul Terronez, they can search it and order it, and they can ship it right to your local bookstore, or even go in and request your library to carry it. If you don't want to buy it, they can get it a digital or paperback version to check out to lots of people. So even having it in your local library is a great thing. But we appreciate you. Have an amazing day and keep writing.